Hello everyone and welcome to Fiction Friday. Today we have episode 5 of The Lightning. I hope you enjoy it. Karash had the others up and in the air just as the first hint of light touched the horizon. All the power he'd expended regenerated overnight, which came as a relief. For a time he'd feared the Queen had simply provided them with a fixed amount of power, and when they'd used it up, that was the end of it. Beside him, Catan flew rigid and aloof, still angry with him for not allowing her a part of the kill yesterday. Unfortunate but unavoidable. If one of the humans had escaped, the mission may have been put in danger. They all flew even lower to the ground now that they'd entered the human kingdom. Karash focused on the knowledge the Queen had provided on the second target's location. There was a road and trees, but nothing very helpful. Everywhere in this miserable place had roads and trees. They were supposed to be west of the city where the human king lived. That gave him a rough idea of where he needed to go. 3 days had passed since the Queen sent them on their mission, so the target must have gone well beyond the location she showed them. Karash snarled. He'd dropped Benai and his team 50 miles west of the capital and let them hunt on their own. It wasn't his task to locate the human pup for them. Human villages became more and more common as they flew deeper into the kingdom. They zigzagged around them so much they hardly made any forward progress at all. Well past high sun, Karash finally landed in a thick grove of evergreens. He turned to Benai. This is as far as we go. Your target lies to the west and ours to the east. Good hunting. Benai bared his fangs. Perhaps we will finish our target and catch up with you. Karash nodded. As long as the Queen's mission succeeded, he didn't care how it got done. Careful, Benai, Sakar said. If you lose to a human whelp, your name will be mocked for all time. Benai's expression turned hard. When this is over, pup, you will hear my challenge. Sakar grinned, displaying a mouthful of perfect fangs. I look forward to it, old one. Benai growled and disappeared at high speed into the trees. Sakar laughed, but Karash only scowled. It was bad form to act so with a comrade before a battle. Enough playing, Karash said. We have our own task. Remember the Queen's lesson and work together to make the veil. Karash and his team surrounded the decoy team and drew on the power provided by their mistress. The group had shrunk enough for them to use the magic to vanish. Shimmering energy surrounded them, and when they flew it shifted color so they blended into the sky. The group headed toward the human capital, and to anyone looking up, they'd appear as nothing more than another cloud. Half an hour later, the group stopped several miles from the city. With his enhanced vision, Karash watched the figures in red flying above the buildings. The Queen had warned them about the red-robed sorcerers. They were supposed to be stronger than some of the other humans, and if the berserkers flew too close, they would sense their approach. The group landed in a field a handful of miles from the city, maintaining the veil as they did so. Karash turned to Akor. When you have the red robes distracted, we will make our attack. Akor nodded. No words were necessary. Karash didn't hold high hopes for Akor and his team surviving this raid, but as long as the human king died as well, they would serve their mistress, and no ogre could ask for a better death. Lon powered through the pre-dawn gloom toward Tower 8. So far he hadn't seen anything resembling an army, and the general considered it unlikely a large force would try to cross the mountains in this area. Lon's gaze slid to the near vertical peaks and had to agree. Unless the dragon planned to ferry her troops across in the air, there was no way for a sizable force to make that crossing unless they planned to spend months doing it. Most likely he'd arrive and find the duty sorcerer standing beside some ogre corpses. After they'd shared a story or two, he'd fly back and let the general know everything was under control. He did his best to convince himself, but he didn't believe it. His gut said something terrible happened at the tower, and Grandfather always said to trust that feeling. The sun had fully risen and the air started to warm when the watchtower came into view. Something had smashed the door open. He flew closer but still sensed no soul force. If the duty sorcerer lived, he should have noticed Lon's approach and come out. Drawing power from his core and using it to reinforce his shield, Lon landed in the shallow snow in front of the ruined door. Tracks from large feet filled the area. Ogres had been here, no question about that. He conjured a light and stepped into the shadowy interior. Stones and splinters mixed in the center of the first floor. He looked up and found a gaping hole in the ceiling. Power crackled around his hands as he flew up to the second floor. No. He released his power and ran to the nearest body. He didn't recognize the woman. In fact, he doubted anyone would, considering how her head had been smashed in. The body was still stiff, so she hadn't been dead long. Lon closed her intact eye and went to the second body. The head lay a few feet to one side. According to the duty roster, a male sorcerer had been assigned to this tower. That meant the woman had to be one of the sorcerers assigned to patrol between the towers. Why didn't he pay attention to their names? It didn't really matter now, but he would have liked to know who the unfortunates were. Lon arranged the bodies in some semblance of repose, bowed and wished them well, wherever their spirits had fled. A burst of soul force disintegrated both bodies. Not exactly a proper burial, but under the circumstances it would have to do. He left the tower and studied the tracks outside. They just appeared right in front of the door. No trail leading to or from the area. No fresh snow filled the visible tracks, so it hadn't snowed over them, and any attempt to brush them out would have left some sign. Lon stared up into the clear blue sky. It looked like they'd landed, killed the sorcerers, and flew away again. Impossible, of course. There was no such thing as an ogre sorcerer. At least no one had ever encountered one in all the years the kingdom had been at war with the dragon. He took to the air. Whatever happened, he wouldn't figure it out standing around here. He'd make a quick patrol of the area and head back to report in. While he begrudged the time, right now Lon had a ton of questions with no answers. At about 100 feet up, he flew in an ever-widening circle. It was a bleak area. Aside from the tower, there was nothing but snow and evergreens. Fortunately, solo postings to the watchtowers only lasted 2 months at a time. Any longer and a sorcerer might go mad with so little to do. About 2 miles from the tower, Lon had had enough. An instant before turning towards base, he spotted a large trampled spot in the snow. He flew down and hovered just above the ground. The sizable group had camped here the night before. They'd made no fire, which argued, strongly, for ogres or some of their allies. And not just one or two. A fair-sized group had stayed there. A brief flight around the perimeter revealed no tracks coming or going. Whatever brought the invaders over the mountain had definitely been in the air. He had to return and warn the general. Apparently they needed to worry about flying ogres now. Frederick's gaze darted from one side of the deserted road to the other, searching for threats in the shadows of the towering maples. A faint breeze ruffled his hair and he sniffed, checking for anything out of the ordinary. Of course, he detected nothing beyond a faint hint of fall flowers. So far today, they'd met a pair of wagons piled high with pumpkins and squash bound for the capital, but nothing more threatening. He stifled a sigh. How did Father stay focused every second, especially when everything appeared so peaceful? It might all be a lie. Just because you can't see the threat doesn't mean it isn't there. Father loved that saying, one of the many he pounded into Frederick over the years before he went to the Citadel to begin his formal training. A quick look at the sky revealed nothing more dangerous than a passing crow. If he had to keep this up, it was going to be a long year. Could you possibly relax? Andrew asked, dragging his mind out of guard mode. I can't keep you safe if I don't stay focused. Heaven's mercy, Frederick. We're only a week out from the capital. These are the safest roads in the kingdom. If you can't enjoy the ride here, I have no hope for you. Andrew had a point, but Frederick knew his duty. Keep the prince safe, his father had said, and Frederick meant to do exactly that. Andrew was free to enjoy his royal tour, but Frederick had no intention of relaxing. Helena laughed, drawing a look from Frederick. What? She waved a hand, trying to cover her smile. Nothing. It's just listening to the two of you remind me of my aunt and uncle. They would have argued about the color of the sky just to have a fight. This is a little more important than the color of the sky, Frederick said. I know, but the feel is the same. You two make an adorable couple. Frederick finally smiled and shook his head. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to relax a little. Best not let the ladies back at court hear you say that, Andrew said. They'll have the daggers out for Frederick instead of each other. Helena laughed again, and Frederick tried not to bristle. His friends were just teasing. He knew that. But sometimes their carefree attitudes rankled. His whole life had been a test, where a momentary lapse might bring a word of rebuke if father was in a good mood, or a blow from a training baton if he wasn't. You didn't simply let go of such training in a week, and Frederick wasn't sure he wanted to let go of it at all. Harsh as it had been, father's training kept him safe and strong, and more importantly than that, it kept those precious to him safe. He darted a look at Helena, and her beauty struck him once more. He'd do anything to keep her safe. Anything. We should reach the Bright Moon Inn tonight, Andrew blathered happily along. It'll be nice to sleep in a bed again. I'm not familiar with the inn, Frederick said. Have you stayed there before? Once. I was traveling with father to an important gathering in Velking, and he rented the entire place. It was quite comfortable, as I recall. I was only 10 at the time, so I didn't pay much attention. Hopefully the serving girls are attractive as well. This time it was Helena who jabbed Andrew with a harsh look. What? The whole point of this trip is to get this sort of thing out of my system before I marry. I thought the point was to see how your average citizens lived so you can better appreciate their struggles, Frederick said. Yeah, but that's really just code for sowing the royal oats. He favored Frederick with a pleading look, right? Frederick shook his head. You don't need my permission to make a fool of yourself. Just be sure not to tell them who you really are. Thanks for listening to episode 5 of The Lightning. I hope you join me next week for episode 6. You can check out the complete Soul Force saga on my website, jamesewisher.com. Link in the description. Until next time, goodbye.